We are back with another episode of What's the Big Idea, our podcast as we look back. I almost said the orange chairs thing. I was like, that's not it.
Been a minute.
As we look back at this past week's sermon, and it was Easter this past Sunday. And so after such a big Sunday and such a big message, Matt's not here to talk about it further on the podcast. He's traveling.
Throwing the B team.
And so you're stuck with me and Eric, each of us repping different teams. Seattle Kraken.
Go Hawks.
Go
in
Hawks.
The playoffs, baby.
For all the Kraken fans out there, this is hockey, by the way. And so this past Sunday, it was Easter Sunday, is obviously a big weekend, just kind of for our church and just for the church, the collective church, as we look back at, of course, the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. And so we kind of have assumed, since Matt knew he would not be here, he gave us a really long, big idea.
Yes.
So we're not going to expect you to have memorized this.
No.
So go ahead and just read us the big idea from this past Sunday.
The big idea, if I can read my own handwriting, the big idea: if you want the best life ever, you have to believe the best news ever, that Jesus is the resurrected Lord. So even after just reading it, I can't memorize it, but I can repeat it and read it again. But great big idea.
That's right.
Very, very specific wording. If you want the best life ever, you have to believe the best news ever, that Jesus is the resurrected Lord.
And kind of, if you've been driving around town, kind of the best news ever was kind of the title of the sermon, but also kind of the graphic. We were driving down Veterans, heading out to Packer Park one day, and Asher saw the billboard, and he saw the church information. He's like, "Oh man, they must have stole that picture from somewhere." Like, no, buddy, it doesn't work like that. We gave it to them. So we do thank you for everybody that was just involved with Sunday service, whether it was with music and or helping serve with kids and preschool and kids worship for 2 services. Just a lot of things that go on behind the scenes,
Correct,
that people don't get to see, that helps the things that are seen take place.
Yes.
So we are grateful for you. And today we're really going to kind of talk about, we're going to center our discussion on prophecy a little bit. And Matt mentioned a couple of things. We're going to talk about a couple of specific chapters from the Old Testament a little bit today. But one thing we wanted to talk about is Matt mentioned kind of a visual thing that I've heard before. Kind of a brief reminder. What are the chances that one person could fulfill 8 prophecies, and 8 very specific prophecies out of the 300 plus that the Old Testament talks about. And I wrote the name down to make sure I get it correct. This is Peter Stoner from the book Science Speaks. And I found the information. It's 8 specific prophecies, and he and some students kind of figured the possibility of each prophecy individually, but also the probability of each prophecy if it depended on one of the other ones. And the number that they came up with is the chance of one person fulfilling these 8 things was 1 times 10 to the 17th power.
It's a lot of zeros.
Which means not a lot, right? And so to come up with a visual to kind of help people understand this is what he came up with. He said, if you took enough quarters or silver dollars, I've kind of seen both as I've been looking at stuff today, and you covered Texas, the state, with enough of those for that stack to be 2 feet deep, and you marked a very specific coin, colored it red, put your initials on it, whatever, and you shook up all the coins so that thing ends up randomly in this 2-foot stack the size of Texas, and you blindfold somebody, and then you tell them to walk, and whenever they feel like stopping, to bend over and dig around if they would like to and grab a coin, and they find the coin.
That is crazy.
That's
because I'm walking in Houston and that coin's in San Antonio.
Yeah, I mean, Texas is a big old,
it's a big old
state. And I had heard that example before, but I'd never looked to see where it came from. So I wanted to share today. Sometimes we can throw out stats and throw out information, and if I was listening, I'm like, well, where does that come from? So I can at least go back, and if somebody wants to do some digging,
yes,
you are more than welcome to. I found this is some of the research, and it talks about the 8 specific prophecies, and it talks about kind of how they came up with the chance and the probability of each one individually.
Mhm.
So it's out there. The research is out there, and it was kind of interesting to dig back through it today. Definitely not worth reading a whole lot of this stuff on the podcast, um, but it is out there. Peter Stoner, Science Speaks, is the name of the book or the research, and so somebody could look that. You could look that up if you chose to. If you were interested, or if you had a night where you couldn't go to sleep, you could probably go and start reading
Just
this
read some-
research project,
Yes,
and it might would help. So,
maybe.
um, so again, that's just kind of a reminder, or not a reminder, but some more information about something that Matt mentioned this past Sunday. But I do want to spend a little bit of time, probably a little shorter podcast than normal today, talking about some of these Old Testament prophecies that we
For sure.
see fulfilled in the crucifixion and the
Mhm.
resurrection. And of course, there are more that are across the life of Jesus.
Yep.
But I know y'all spent some time talking about one of those in particular that you see if you start looking up prophecies tied to the resurrection and crucifixion. It's one of the
Mhm.
chapters that pop up. So kind of share what y'all were talking about with the kids.
So, kids worship, we were in Mark. And in Mark, when you look at the death and the resurrection, Jesus is hanging on the cross. And I'm not going to try and say what he said in Hebrew
Yeah.
because it says it in Hebrew. And so I'm going to go to the English.
Yes.
It's translated, my God, why have you forsaken me? And so as we looked at that, I think maybe some of the kids were like, how does God forsake? They didn't say forsake. They don't know what that means.
Yeah.
So then we had to break it down like it's God leaving or turning away or abandoning. And we know that like God's not just going to leave Jesus. Like he's not going to abandon Jesus. And part of that is Jesus is God. So then you have to ask the question, how does he abandon himself?
Yeah, yes.
But what we see Jesus referring to is in Psalm 22. And so we flipped over to Psalm 22, and a lot of the Pharisees that would have been around would have recognized this as a psalm because Psalm 22:1 starts off, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me from the words of my groaning? And then as you scroll down and get specifically into verse 16, we talked about verse 16 and 17, um, and then 18 as well. It says, for dogs that encompass me, a company of evildoers encircles me, for they have pierced my hands and feet. I can count all my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothes they cast lots. And so as we look at that, and talking to the kids, we like when we talk about the crucifixion, realistically, it can be like a little gruesome. And so the kids, they've been taught, a lot of them have been taught their whole life, yeah, Jesus died on the cross for their sins. And so when we look at that, we see specifically like some of the things that was done around the cross. Like they would take lots, they would cast lots. They were trying to basically sell off and um take Jesus's clothes and stuff like that. And so as they did that, like we see this referenced all the way back in Psalms, and we see in the Psalms them also talking about the hands and the feet pierced. And so asking the kids, what does it mean when we talk about something being pierced? You know, and so for them it's easy to relate. Oh well, people have their ears pierced, and so there's a hole that's driven into the skin. And so for them, it's yes, well, Jesus's hands and his feet were pierced, and that's what we see in Psalm 22 is this very specific prophecy of the death of Jesus, and not just the death, but some of the actions of those around the cross. And sometimes that's even more uh, solidifying information that this was a specific prophecy for Jesus. And so we can see that those around the cross and hearing Jesus probably weren't asking the questions of what does it mean that God has forsaken him, but
Right.
rather their first thought is, oh, Psalm 22, and Jesus is letting them know, I'm the one Psalm 22 is about. Like it is prophesying this death that is happening currently. Um, and then obviously, as we talk about that, we get into, well, Jesus was definitely dead. Jesus died, but then 3 days later he rose. And so we got to talk about the Easter story and the resurrection of Jesus as well. But I think one, it's cool that one Matt talks about the prophecies that were told of his death and of his resurrection. And
Yep.
I mean, for us, we very much so value scripture in the kids ministry. And one, I think making those cross references and helping kids understand that scripture is one continuous story.
Right.
Um, yes, we can break out the Psalms, or we can say, here's Isaiah, or here's uh, Zechariah, or whatever it is. But ultimately, we see it as one continuous story, and just taking a small part of that and saying, hundreds of thousands of years ago, they were saying that this was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so helping the kids connect, because even now we're in uh, Second Samuel, getting into First Kings, and we're talking about Solomon becoming king. And so then relating it back to, well, let's look at Matthew and let's see how the line of David, God made this promise and how he kept that promise. And so it's fun to be able to look at the death of Jesus and go back and say, hey, this was something that we knew was coming. This is something that they knew was coming.
Right.
And just adding that credibility to scripture.
Yeah.
Um, but you also on Good Friday talked about Isaiah 53,
Yeah.
which is a prophecy from Isaiah. So go
Yeah.
ahead and take us a little into that.
So, kind of to hit back and to connect to the quarter stoner story earlier. One of the prophecies of Psalm 22 is one of the 8 that they looked at.
Yes.
When I looked at the list, it was the 8th one, Psalm 22:16. For dogs have encompassed me; the assembly of the wicked have enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. So I think that was the only one in that list. But I did remember Psalm 22 being in there. And even before we get into Isaiah 53, I think, you said one of the things you talked about as you were talking with kids about is we read scripture and we say, well, Jesus was killed and Jesus was crucified, to be more specific about the method.
For sure.
One of the things we did last week, Wednesday night, with our students, with our youth, is we looked at a part of the chapter from the book of Case for Christ. And in that, Lee Strobel does multiple interviews with different people, different experts on different things. And one of the experts he talks to is a guy named, I'm not going to say this name correctly, Alexander, I'm good with, Metherell. That's the last name I'm not 100% sure about. And so,
We'll go with it.
who is a very smart dude, has a doctorate, has a medical doctorate, as well as like a PhD. I mean, it's not even borderline brilliant. He way past the line of
Yes.
brilliant. And so, but what he does is he talks about the medical aspect of the crucifixion. And it's not the easiest thing to read from just a compassionate standpoint, because he goes into pretty explicit detail about what would have taken place those last few days of Jesus's life, from the garden and praying to the point where he sweats drops of blood, through the scourging that he would have received, through the crucifixion itself. And man, it's hard to think about the totality of what the crucifixion. When we say Jesus was crucified, what do we mean?
Yeah.
And so I've done that every couple of years. I probably have done that with students, just to I don't want, I'm not trying to shock somebody necessarily.
Yeah.
But it is shocking if you've
Yes.
never thought about it. But just for our students to really understand, when we read that Jesus died, and we read that his hands and his feet were pierced, which it sounds terrible, but when he starts getting into, like, what did that mean? What kind of pain are we talking about? It's crazy to think about that. But on Friday, for our Good Friday service, man, thank you for those that came. We met in the chapel, and
Good turnout.
we did have a pretty good turnout, especially with some crazy weather that decided to bust through part of the county not long before the service was supposed to start. And we ended that service talking about the chief priests and the scribes and how they joined in the mocking of Jesus. And I asked, I kind of made the statement, man, too bad they didn't have somebody that they trusted to try to help explain to them what's going on. But when we think about who it is, it's the chief priests and the scribes.
Yep.
And they did have somebody that they trusted to talk about it. They
Mhm.
had the author of Psalm 22 that they trusted
Mhm.
and would have known. Thus, why it's such a key line of Jesus from the cross that I don't know if I don't even remember how recently I made the connection to the Old Testament for that, but it's been relatively recent, I
Yes.
think. Um, well, we talked about Isaiah 53 being another place where um, these leaders, and especially the religious leaders at the time in Jerusalem, man, they would have been just Old Testament scholars, what we call the Old Testament scholars, and well aware of just quoting all this stuff. And I mean, they spent their life studying it with, for the most part, with their heart's desire to
Mhm.
live out the things that it called and to pay attention to the things that it pointed to.
Yep.
And so Isaiah 53, here's just a few verses. This is Isaiah 53. We'll start with verse 4. It says, "Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted." In verse 5, "But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed." Verse 6 says, "All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed, he was afflicted, and yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, like a sheep that is before its shears is silent, so he opened not his mouth." And it continues on for a few more verses. Um, but when we start thinking about and reading in the New Testament,
Mhm.
that when accused in on at the trial that Jesus received, when he's accused and repeatedly asked, "What do you say for yourself?" he offers no response.
Yep.
Um, he doesn't offer a defense. Um, uh, I think it's Pilate even gives an answer at one time. Jesus is like, "Well, you said it, not me."
Yeah.
I think like that's
Yeah.
very much paraphrase. But it doesn't offer up. He doesn't offer up an argument.
Yep.
Um, and then we start looking at these descriptions of, for our iniquities he is pierced, which goes, I mean, that's another reference
Mhm.
to what Psalm 22
Mhm.
references, obviously the nails in the hands and the feet. But you see Old Testament prophecies that talk about his legs won't be broken or his bones won't be broken.
Mhm.
And if you read that and you're like, well, I don't understand what the connection is, then you have to understand in crucifixion, a lot of times to speed up the process of dying, they would break the person's legs
Yeah.
because death is by the inability to breathe a lot of
Mhm.
times. And so when you break their legs, they can't push up, they can't breathe and breathe in and breathe out, and it speeds up the process of their dying. But Jesus, he didn't have to have his legs broken
Mhm.
because he was already dead when they got ready to check. And so we start seeing all these things from the Old Testament that specifically talk about the crucifixion and the resurrection of
Yeah.
Jesus. And um, and then you start putting the pieces together.
Mhm.
Um, that Jesus did that one, and Jesus fulfills this one,
Mhm.
and Jesus fulfills this one. Um, it becomes what feels like a relatively overwhelming set of support.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that I think I like, as you were talking about, I was reminded of, as they were writing these texts, crucifixion on a cross was not a thing. Like
Right.
that was a Roman thing that
Yes.
came thousands of years later.
Hmm.
And so you read this and you go, what were they talking about?
Yeah.
Like I can only imagine the writers at the time just kind of like, oh, and
Yeah.
like, I don't know why I'm writing this, but
Yeah.
it is inspired. You know,
Yes.
like it's things like that where I go, like, yeah, most prophecies they'll have a double meaning. There's
Hmm.
it's the meaning of the time and then what's to come.
Right.
But I couldn't like that was probably not even on their radar.
Right.
Like a crucifixion by a cross
Yeah.
does not make sense to them.
No. The idea, like you said, the idea wouldn't have existed
Yeah.
at the time. This is just it's crazy to think about all these things and all these details that are discussed hundreds of years before that we see start taking place um, as we look at the realities of what Jesus did. And um, again, it seems like a large amount of support. I get some people will read these things and not land in the same spot.
Yep.
And um, and one of the things that Matt mentioned in the message Sunday, it talked about scoffers, or another translation would be foolishness. And that can seem strong. But we're also, I was looking up some scripture. We're studying 1 Corinthians at 18:25. And in the beginning of 1 Corinthians, it's in chapter 1. I'm not going to try to quote it exactly, but Paul says the teaching of the gospel is foolishness to some.
Mhm.
And because they read it like, this is crazy. Maybe it's too good to be true, which Matt has referenced. That idea Matt has referenced as well. I guess I think each of us in our own ministries with kids and students, but also with parents, and we would encourage, research this yourself.
Yes.
Look to the scriptures, Old Testament, New Testament. Be willing to, even if you inherently don't believe it, be willing to consider the possibility that when you look at the Old Testament, it's talking about Jesus, even though his name doesn't show up. Like you said earlier. It is one continuous story from Genesis to Revelation. Jesus is the thread through all of it. So even somebody that might be skeptical, I think we would encourage them. Would you consider reading it with that mindset?
Yeah.
If this is talking about Jesus, what do we see in the Old Testament? Do we see that consistently coming through in the New Testament? And then do we see it? Those pieces of the Old Testament, this is showing up here in the life of Jesus. This is being quoted by Jesus to quote the Old Testament. It's being used by some of these other authors to quote the Old Testament to point to the life of Jesus. 300 plus total prophecies.
Yeah.
And if it's 1 in 10 to the 17 for just 8 of them, how impossibly high is 1 out of 300 and something. Or one person to do all 300.
Yeah, and one thing that you talked about is, and I guess I mentioned it too, but that continuous story, as we're doing our Bible reading plan, and as we read through the Bible, I go, man, this is such a good reminder of how the story is continuous and how everything points to Jesus. And the younger you can do that as a family, the better. I think it's so important to have the kids alongside you as you read through. Now, with that being said, there are some things that you're going to read and you're going to go, whew, I don't know if my 6-year-old needs to be hearing this. And
That's
so,
right.
obviously, it's good for you to read it too, and read it beforehand. But I do think it's important to be able to read through the Bible and make those connections. Because then you will start to see the prophecies. You will get to pick up on things where it is talking about Jesus, and you get to see the big picture. So I think reading through the Bible is so incredibly important in understanding this to an even fuller sense.
You said big picture. I thought you was about to say, let's see the big idea.
The big
I thought
idea.
you were fixing to
I could have snuck it in
really
there.
get it in there. The big idea of the Bible, Jesus. There we go. And so when I asked Matt, Matt a lot of times kind of comes up with some of the things he wants to discuss on the podcast. And of course, since he's not here today, I went to him yesterday. I said, what do you want us to talk about? You're going to have to give me and Eric some sort of some guardrails.
Prophecy.
And it really was. He said, the thing that somebody might have questions about is the prophetic side of what we talked about. The gospel's pretty straightforward. And it was very much a gospel message.
Yep.
I would a couple things I would think about as we think about sharing the gospel with others and think about even missions. And when Paul started speaking, he pointed to their past. He pointed to what they knew as he was in the synagogue. He went back to the Old Testament. He understood their history, understood their culture, he understood their language. When we're trying to interact with people, the more we can understand their history, their culture, and their language, probably the better prepared we are.
Yeah.
Whether that's people locally, I've heard it. I went to a youth pastors conference one time, and they said for some of your adults in your church, when they try to go interact with students in youth ministry, it's a completely different language.
Yes.
Help them out. help them learn the language of students. I can't keep up with the language of students at
Nor can I.
times. Um, but that's just a kind of a general. As we're going to watch now, we're going to see Paul move forward and go through all these missionary journeys and all these different places. But we see that reality in Paul's life. We see that reality in just missionary stories in general. Like the better I can understand the people I'm talking to,
Mm-hmm.
the better I can help connect
Yep.
what they know to Christ, and how can we, what are the bridges that we've got to cross? Some that may be bigger than others.
Yes.
But Paul did that. We see that in an example from the message this past Sunday. Let me tell you the Old Testament. You know these stories. Here. Now let's talk about Jesus.
Yep.
So a good little path for us, a little pattern for us to follow as well. And then the last couple things that he mentioned, just kind of a challenge for those of you that are listening.
Mm-hmm.
If you were here Sunday or weren't here Sunday, good reminders. One, he talks about how to remain in step with Jesus. He says, attend church the next week. And we would challenge you to be faithful
Mm-hmm.
to a local congregation, a local body of believers that teaches the Bible. Matt mentioned it. I mean, we would love for you, if you don't have a home church, for First Baptist to be potentially that place.
Yep.
But we're not in competition with other Bible believing and Bible preaching, gospel preaching churches. We're all desiring the same thing. And so we would encourage you to attend church this Sunday somewhere that preaches the Bible, preaches Jesus as the way to salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing that he mentioned was to take the next step, and he referenced that to verse 43, where it just says where Paul says to continue in the grace of God. And so, for you that are listening, what is the next step look like for you? Is it salvation or baptism? Is it finding a place to serve? Is it the Lord's laid a ministry on your heart, and you want to figure out what does that look like? So if you're connected to our church or are interested in conversations, like reach out. Not that we have all the answers, but we'd love to walk with somebody that's kind of wrestling with some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But what we don't want to have happen is for people to have come to a service on Easter
Mm-hmm.
and walk up and say, "Man, what a great service!" And then that's it.
Yep.
For some, our desire it would be kind of a springboard into,
Mm-hmm.
and then just a re-energized focus on their faith.
Yeah.
And so, anything else before we kind of close this bad boy down for today?
I don't think so. I think, like you said, Matt was like prophecy, and so we'll talk about that, and
Yeah.
then obviously the next steps are important. I think for kids ministry, when you look at it, a lot of times next steps isn't necessarily serving in a certain ministry, but rather it's diving deeper into your faith, or,
That's
or
right.
having an understanding of what faith looks like or who God is. And every time I get the chance, I'm going to plug it. We've got resources upstairs. You
Yeah.
talked about a case for Christ. Believe it or not, we've got a case for Christ for kids.
Yeah.
Upstairs, sitting in that room, waiting for somebody to say, "I want this book.
Yeah.
Send me a picture of it, and I will buy it for you." Like
Yeah.
it's not that hard.
Yeah.
We have resources. We want you to use these resources. And for kids, like there's a lot that they're trying to learn, and there's a lot that we want to teach them.
Yep.
Use other resources. We have them here, and if that's your next step too,
That's right.
we've got resources for you as
That's
well.
right.
So that's the only thing I really have to add.
Yeah. And so we'll be back this Sunday, and Matt will be back in the pulpit. Maybe he'll be here
I don't know.
next Tuesday to record.
Hopefully.
Maybe so. We need a guest, a special guest sometime. I don't know. That'll probably never happen. It was a good idea in my head, and then
throw it out there.
And then when I said it out loud, I was like, "Nah, that's probably a terrible idea."
Sometimes I start a sentence and I
I don't know where it's going. Man, thank y'all for watching. Thank you for those of you again that were here this past Sunday or at any of the Holy Week stuff that took place in the community at our church or in your home church. Man, thank you very much.
Thanks for being at the Easter egg hunt.
That's
had a
right.
Great time. I had a blast.
The egg hunt was awesome.
It was so much fun.
We had a lot of families
Mhm.
show up. That was great. And for our church people that came and talked and welcomed those folks, man,
Thank you for being there.
that's perfect
Yes.
for an event like that. So have a great rest of your week, and we will see you Sunday.